Good afternoon. I'd like to thank everybody for coming. It's wonderful to see what's very much a full house. On the eve of launching Time and Motion, Redefining Working Life, and also for the Roy Stringer Centenary Lecture. This is a partnership with Amaze, a local company, started by Roy Stringer himself. I've also got some thank yous, the Creative Exchange, AHSE-funded research project, and also the Royal College of Art, the RCA, who've been our collaborators on the working project. We've also got the Liverpool City Council here, and the Arts Council, who of course provide us with the funding and support we need to survive. That's much appreciated for their continued support. We welcome today the Lord Mayor, Gary Miller, who's just down here, my good friend, many other distinguished guests, and a special mention, who I've just met for the first time, Alice Stringer, the late Roy Stringer's wife, and her son Paul, who's also a good friend of mine. So thank you for coming. Every summer holiday, I'd go off to the salubrious Walney Island. For those that don't know, that's pretty much just off the coast of Barrenfurness. And I'd have a holiday with me grandma and me grandmother. And my granddad, of course, who used to work at Vickers Shipyard as a welder. He worked on the Polaris nuclear-powered submarine. He had a very kind of masculinized form of industrial labour that came straight out of the Industrial Revolution. Now, what would happen is, as my grandma was waiting for him to come home, she would hear the hooter and then start warming up his tea. And by the time he was home, the dinner would be on the table. So back then, we knew when work had finished, yeah? And there were quite literally the closing of the factory gates. That's a kind of returning theme in many of the artworks that you'll see within the exhibition when we open it later. Assuming that you're working, and of course some of you won't be, but if you are, 25% of you have admitted to starting your working day in bed. How does that kind of lie in relationship to the idea of the workers leaving the factory gates, quoting Lumiere? It's confused, and it's kind of accelerating at such a pace that we're still trying to make sense of this stuff. Jeremy Marston has been collaborating with me on this exhibition for the last 18 months. We've sort of explored redefining working life, the work-life balance in the digital age, because it's become confused. Because when you got these things, you know, do you know when you're working or whether you're communicating, or is your social networking actually work? Because perhaps you don't know. And I think we're trying to make sense of all of that. I don't know many people who are really that happy with their work-life balance. Is anyone here happy with their work-life balance? Excellent, Gary, our Lord Mayor is. Yeah, that's good news. I actually am with mine. I'm very privileged. There's probably quite a few people here who work in the arts and cultural industries. And we're very privileged, of course, because we enjoy our work so much. But sometimes when you're on holiday, if I have a holiday now, I leave my phone and my laptop at home. I have no technology holidays. No, but not everyone can do that. And then, of course, there are other people that have still got very traditional 9 till 5s. So when we make an ironic statement about getting the exhibition audience to clock in downstairs to see the show, saying how long they're going to spend working or at leisure looking at the exhibition, that, of course, is still the reality for maybe 70% of this population who are working in this country. The clocking on machine is still very prevalent. And then, of course, using data, metadata, surveillance systems, people know anyway. So why Roy Stringer? Why the Roy Stringer Lecture? Well, it's 10 years since this building opened, and we've been doing Roy Stringer Memorial Lectures on and off over that period of time. And he was so relevant to Facts History. He was the founding chair at the birth of the building project, and he was himself completely consumed in the possibilities of both technology and interaction. I had a very short meeting with him when he came to see Kingston Communications when I was in Hull, and he basically showed a design for something which, for those of you that are Virgin customers, is the TiVo box. Effectively, the TiVo handset was what he'd already visioned back in the early 1990s. So he was very, very pioneering. Now, today in our talk, Sir Christopher Frayling may help us understand where we've got to, having moved from that kind of technocentric, utopian, modernist hope that this was going to help sort society out through technology, to our kind of hard, overworked reality. And he's going to do that through a selection of films, which I'm very excited to see. I really do not know what he's chosen, but I know he's found one film that no one's ever seen before. We are equally honoured to have Eddie Berg. And Eddie Berg, of course, is a very old friend of mine, the founding director of FACT, and, of course, in the early days, back when it was Video Positive, the organisation that led to FACT, first invited me to Liverpool when he was launching the Video Positive Festival. At that point, I was a mere practitioner, an artist, showing at the Blue Coat when Video Positive was based down there with Moviola. That's led to this glorious centre, 10 years old, at the heart of the Liverpool regeneration agenda. Of course, I also want to welcome two other people in the audience. We've got Clive Gilman and Iona Horsburgh, who were the two other directors working with Eddie at that time, who also could see the vision and take it forward. And Iona's now back at FACT working with me here. So that's fantastic that you can be down here as well. Thank you, Clive. As we celebrate Roy Stringer's life, we've got the opening of the wonderful exhibition, and I hope that you're going to look forward to another 10 years of the FACT Centre and our programme. I now want to hand over to Wendy Stonefield. So if you'd like to come and join me, Wendy. Wendy Stonefield is the Chief Commercial Officer for Amaze Limited. We've also got Alistair Albeck in the audience, who is one of the employees of Amaze. There's a brilliant creative who's doing experimental work down on the ground floor, which is an ongoing partnership with Amaze. So over to you, Wendy.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, Lord Mayor. I am delighted at having been asked to say a few words about Roy and my experience of working with him, and a little bit about Roy's connection with Amaze. Put simply, I suppose, Amaze would not exist without Roy. Amaze was Roy, and he left us an everlasting imprint on the business that is still very much evident today. He moulded the thinking of many of our key team members who have gone on to build teams around themselves that I think Roy would himself approve of today. Roy had relentless amounts of energy, passion, and drive. His depth and breadth of knowledge as an individual was often very surprising. I was once in a meeting in Shell in the Netherlands with Roy. We were embarking on a substantial e-learning project, and we were being briefed in on the subject of borehole instability, so quite obscure. Partway through the lecture, Roy stopped the lecturer and then started to recount his knowledge on some of the major factors that were influencing on the problems that they were involved with on the problem of borehole instability. A room full of us just sat round with our mouths hanging open because Roy had nailed the subject, knew exactly what we needed to, the nut that we needed to get to, and we were all found it quite incredible that he knew about a subject so obscure and specialised. He somehow managed to do it in a way, though, that was so charming and without any element of arrogance whatsoever. He was my friend, he was my mentor, and for many of us at Amaze, he's instilled a lifetime drive and commitment and a passion to pushing technology to the nth degree and to make a difference using it. A purist he absolutely was. He did not suffer fools gladly, and that included clients. And in that sense, I can thank Roy for creating some fantastically challenging scenarios for me to smooth over with clients, having had a meeting with him. All good training, of course, and all, more importantly, for the right reasons. He was so talented and gifted that he did not have time to waste with people who didn't get it. He was always on a mission, and as somebody who was fortunate and privileged enough to join him on many of those missions, it is a fantastic honour for me and for Amaze to be part of the work that FACT do and to keep his memory alive. Often asked about what makes Amaze different and what gets us out of bed in the morning, our response is always the same: to inspire original thinking through a deeper understanding of human behavior and technology. And for that, we and our clients have Roy Stringer to thank. I'm now going to hand over to Eddie Berg, who of course I know needs little introduction, but without whom we wouldn't be standing here in this fantastic centre. I know, Eddie, since I last saw you, that you've gone on to do some tremendously impressive work as Director of the BFI South Bank, and more recently as Director of Partnerships, leading tremendously successful and ambitious projects, not to mention all the work that you've done with BAFTA and as a Fellow with the Royal Society of Arts. Ladies and gentlemen, Lord Mayor, I introduce you to Eddie Berg.
Thanks, Wendy. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and Lord Mayor. Great to be here. So I was here about 4 weeks ago, actually, for a BFI event. So I think I'm going to come back monthly from now on. If the rhythm feels right, the timing feels right. But I'm going to talk a little bit about Roy and my kind of encounters with Roy, really, over a period of time. Because I obviously there are some people in the room who've known Roy a very long time, and there are some people who've had some the occasional contact with Roy, and there are some of you who never met Roy, and you're going to know Roy just from what we're saying today. So I just want to talk to you about some of the things that really kind of stick in my mind. I want to take you back to about 25 years. Yeah, I know I looked like I was probably at school 25 years ago. You're supposed to sort of largely agree with me at this point. So, but anyway, 25 years ago, I'd rented a little office at the Blue Coat, and I kind of stuck a name on the door. The name was Moviola, and Moviola was the name of the organisation that eventually became Fact. So the reason I'd rented the office is, as Mike said, because I'd developed this project called Video Positive, which was a biennial of video art and new media, and we needed somewhere we could just have some meetings and make phone calls and send faxes. In fact, the fax machine took up about 1/3 of the available office space. Such was the power of the fax machine. But I was kind of working on this, with a couple of other people, but on this kind of ludicrously ambitious project, or what seemed like a ludicrously ambitious project called Video Positive. And around that time, in Liverpool, there was a free newspaper, some of you will know it, called Merseymart. Yeah? Who knows Merseymart? So there is now. I don't expect your encyclopedic knowledge of Merseymart to go back to 1988 to particular editions of it, but one edition was about a cluster of new businesses that had opened on Brunswick Dock, and I suppose we kind of see it now as a sort of proto-creative industries thing, but back then it was just a kind of series of businesses. So in the midst of this editorial was a single image, and the single image was a picture of Roy Stringer in a suit and tie. It's actually the only time I've ever seen Roy in a suit and tie. I mean, obviously I didn't see him in the flesh in the suit and tie, but it's the only time I've seen a representation of Roy in a suit and tie. And he was sitting next to a computer. This image of Roy was I found kind of really fascinating, and also because the computer was a kind of 1984 original Mac, and it looked both Roy and the computer looked sort of weirdly futuristic and exotic in the context of Merseymart, and And there was this quote from Roy which said something like, I can't remember it verbatim, but I remember that this is more or less what he was saying, is that he was saying that his organisation was the new media business for the rest of us. So he was paraphrasing the original Mac slogan of the computer for the rest of us from 1984. So the company he was running at the time was called Bit32. So I'm sure some of you know that. And then he in the article he was making these claims about new media and about Liverpool, and he was saying what was going to happen to the city within 10 years. It just seemed ludicrously ambitious. So being young and naive. And I wanted to share my own ludicrous ambitions with him. So I went back to the little office at the Blue Coat, and after having picked up the Mersey Mart downstairs, and I went to my Amstrad 512. You'll remember, some of you may remember the Amstrad 512, and I banged out a letter. Can you believe a letter, an actual letter to Roy? So a week or so later, I actually got a phone call from someone who worked with Roy at Bit32 saying, Roy'd like to meet you. So I sat alone in his office for a few minutes waiting for Roy, and obviously my only kind of sense of Roy was this guy in the picture with a Mac, and he turned up into the office in what became clear that was his kind of standard issue wardrobe at that point and beyond, which was faded blue jeans, plimp soles, and actually at the time it was a T-shirt with an image of Frank Zappa doing something mildly obscene. So this is how Roy looked at this point. So it wasn't kind of what I was expecting, but he obviously didn't think I was an investor, let's say, at this point in time, or maybe he did. Maybe that was kind of Roy's approach. But we talked about a lot of things, and we talked for a long time, and I came away from that incredibly enthused and inspired, but also challenged and provoked. He made me question a lot of things that I was just starting to kind of understand about what I was doing. But I felt I'd met a kindred spirit, and that was the most important thing. Now, Roy, as Wendy said, Roy didn't suffer fools gladly, and he wasn't someone I would call a kind of bored person. He wasn't the kind of person you go to and say, you can make a kind of conventional contribution to a board. He wasn't that kind of person. Roy's talents, Roy's energies, Roy's ideas found different form. But later on, just as we were starting to give the building projects some definition, and this is the sort of mid to late 90s, Roy came onto the board, and he brought a lot of new insights to the board and to the organisation. The only problem, though, was that this is the point at which Roy was really kind of taking off, and the Roy Stringer brand as an individual was really going, and so he spent a lot of time somewhere else. So in a celebration of his elusiveness, a little piece, I can remember that a little piece of graffito once appeared on a flip chart in the meeting room. It read, "What's the difference between God and Roy?" And underneath someone had written, "God is everywhere, whereas Roy is everywhere but here." What made Roy special? We've already heard about some of the things that that made Roy an incredible figure in terms of his contribution to Liverpool, his contribution to ideas, and his contribution to a kind of understanding of possibilities about the future. But he had at the same time as all of that, he had a huge commitment, enthusiasm and passion, I think, for the city of Liverpool. And that was something that we both kind of shared. And I think he wanted to see the city undergo a kind of creative and social renewal in the same way that a lot of people did at the time. The fact that Roy at the end of the day, didn't get to see fact has always been a kind of, a source of kind of great sorrow for me, because I think whilst, there's nothing I can point to here specifically that's actually got Roy's name on, I know that the fact that he made such an imaginative contribution to our thinking about the building and about the organisation in general was hugely important. And when the building opens, and here we are 10 years later after the building opens, Roy's spirit is still, I think, front and centre of the building. Now, a few weeks before Roy died, I took part in an event that Roy helped to organise. It was an attempt to tackle familiar problems and challenges using unfamiliar methods and techniques. Very Roy. Roy's health meant that he couldn't contribute to the whole event, but when he did, his contribution was always telling. I can remember one thing that really kind of stuck with me right at the end. Roy had to kind of sneak off late on the second day, but at the plenary at the end of the event, someone said, "Where's Roy?" And someone else immediately quipped, "He's not here, he's in the future." And that's because there was always this sense that Roy, when he wasn't here, was always somehow in the future and bringing that future back to the present. And in many ways, that future is now our present with all its possibilities and challenges. So before I wrap up on Roy, I just want to say something briefly about those things in the context of fact. So Liverpool now, I think we'd all agree, is unimaginable without fact. I hope you all think that, because, think about how our city was before fact was here, and before lots of other really important things came into the city, came into life in the city. But fact gave form to a lot of ambitions and aspirations that I think are really, really significant still today. So fact continues to be at the creative vanguard, and I think it's really important that for those of us who want to support that process and that ambition, that we get behind fact in a time of great challenges, particularly financially. So I think one of the things that you can do is that if you are normally in these sort of events, I don't ask you to, you're not normally asked to get your phones on, but interestingly, nobody said turn your phones off at the beginning. There is, but if you just happen to have your phone on and you're interested in making a donation to FACT to support its campaign to raise £10,000, I think there are an additional £10,000. I think 8,000 has already been pledged. Then you can text, and I'm going to say this slowly so you all get it. You can text FACT03 plus the amounts that you'd like to donate to 70070. Now, I noticed that none of you took that down. So either you've got brilliant memories, or you need to hear that again because you weren't paying attention the first time, okay? So it's 70070, FACT03, plus the amounts that you want to pledge. So look, finally, because we've still got the main act to come, and it is a truly amazing main act. So I just wanted to say something that happened to me very recently, actually, that reminded me of the significance of Roy. But before I do that, I just want to say that that one of the things that I remember about Roy, wherever I went, is that when I said Roy's name, just Roy Stringer, people would invariably say 3 or 4 things about him. They would say brilliant, inspiring, visionary. But what really set Roy apart, and why I think he meant much to so many people, was that he had an incredible generosity of spirit. If he liked you, if he liked your ideas, if he liked you, if you were uncynical and you had enthusiasm for what you wanted to do, and if he thought there was a kernel of something to work with, he would get right behind you. And so many people I met, so many contexts and places said that very same thing to me. And then weirdly, a month ago, I was in a queue for coats at a kind of swanky club in London after a speech by Vince Cable. That's how exciting my life is at the moment. There is so I'm in this queue and I'm talking to someone who's saying to me, well, you know, how often did you go back to Liverpool? Da da da, and what's happening? And I said, I'm up a couple of times, and then I'm like, the second time I'm going to do something at the Roy Stringer lecture, and somebody behind me, a woman behind me said, "Oh, Roy Stringer, you know Roy Stringer?" I said, "Yeah." So we had a quick chat, and this person used to work for the BBC, and she said, incredibly, she said, "Oh wow, I met Roy once. I met him wherever it was, 1999 or something. It was." And I'd met him, and she just said it was perfect. It was perfect. I said, well, what to tell me what happened. She said, I don't remember the detail of our conversation, but what I remember is thinking this person is a complete one-off, completely unique. And she said, and this is brilliant because it kind of reaffirmed everything else. He spoke like someone who'd arrived from the future. And so I think that is a sentiment, those sentiments about being a complete one-off, being completely unique, and being someone who was able to see the future, see the potential and the possibilities of the future, and start to introduce those in incredibly imaginative ways, is Roy's legacy, in the same way that this building is part of that legacy. Thank you.